Hello everyone, welcome to Scholarsharp. Today the chapter that we will be doing is We Are Not Afraid to Die If We Are All Together by Gordon Cook and Alan East. Before I start, I would like you all to have your book Hornbill just before you so that as I speak you can make your notes side by side. Let's get started. The chapter that we are doing is We Are Not Afraid to Die If We Are All Together by Gordon Cook and Alan East. So this chapter has a lot of details in it and it has a lot of terms that we as readers are not aware of. But today I will try and make this chapter as easy as possible, and for that I have divided this chapter into 3 phases. But before we start with that, I would like to give you the base story or the underlining story of this chapter. So basically there was a journey that was made by a captain called James Cook 200 years ago, and he went for a round the world trip by the sea, which is called a voyage. And the narrator of this story, he wants to duplicate that trip. He also wants to make that trip with his family around the world voyage, and he goes with, and he's preparing for that for like 16 years now, and he's going with his wife Mary, his son Jonathan, and his daughter Suzanne. So they have been practicing their seafaring skills, their sailing skills for like 16 years now, and they have this huge boat which is called the Weight Walker, which is a 16-ton, 23-meter huge boat, and they are ready for the trip. They also take with them 2 crewmen, that is Larry Vigil and Herb Segler, with them so that they have some professional help while they are on the journey. And on this journey they come across a life-threatening incident, a disaster, and they're literally on the verge of death. And the story is about the grit, determination and courage that the family together put in and have so that they overcome that disaster. They find strength in the unity of the family, they find strength in each other, and they are finally able to overcome that incident and find a safe place for them. And this is the basic story. Now coming to the theme of the chapter. So basically there are 2 themes. First is courage, valor and composure. So it is very important to have courage in the face of an adversity. If we have the courage to fight it, and if we do not kneel down to it, bow down to it, but we actually face it head on, then we can assure ourselves with victory. It is also very important to have composure in the time of an adversity. We have to have a very calm and stable mind, a healthy state of mind, so that we are able to concentrate on the solution to face the adversity. If we have an unstable mind, if we are really panicked about it, and we end up taking a rush decision or a hurried decision, that will result in the worst. So it is very important to have a calm and composed mind. The second theme of this chapter is strength in togetherness. As I explained in this chapter, the family of 4 people, they find strength in themselves as a unit, as a family, and then they are able to overcome that thing. Everybody inspires, for a family member, the other members inspire them that we have to overcome this life-threatening incident. Death, we have to overcome death, we have to fight for survival. For the narrator, he feels that I have to overcome this incident for my children, for my family. For the children, they think that the father is fighting so hard against this incident and against death, and he is making so many efforts for our survival. Then yes, we also have to fight together, and we also have to stay strong in this journey. So there is strength in unity, there is strength in togetherness. Even the name of the chapter, that we are not afraid to die if we are all together, is said by the son. He says it to his father, and he says that I'm not even afraid of something as huge as death if we are together in this. So these are the themes of the chapter. Now, there, as I said, a lot of terms in this chapter that we are not aware of. So I remember when I was doing this chapter for my exams, there are a lot of parts of a boat mentioned, and I just didn't know those things at all, and I drew myself a diagram in my notebook about a ship, about a boat, and I just labeled all the parts of the diagram so that I understand what does each part mean, so that tomorrow if I frame a sentence, I do not just mix up the words because I don't know what they mean and I just end up mugging and then writing them wrong because I just forgot. So I've drawn you also a diagram here. So basically, this is the main mast of a ship. The mast is basically an upright structure which supports the sails of the ship. We have the mainsail. The mainsail is basically like a triangular staysail which basically helps the ship move forward. We have the storm jib. The storm jib is the smaller staysail. Then we have the stern. The stern is the rear end of a ship, and it's like basically the backside, this part. The starboard. So the starboard is basically the right hand side of the boat. The other side would be the left side, but the right hand side is the starboard. So that is the basic structure of a ship. There are other terms in the chapter also that I will discuss as we move on with the chapter. Now I have divided the chapter into 3 phases for better understanding. First is before the disaster, how the family was, how the trip was, before the disaster, what all they did and everything. The next is disaster and dealing with it, what were the kind of problems that came with the disaster, how the family dealt with it, what kind of solutions they took to overcome it. The next is aftermath and safe at last, that is, they were finally safe, they had overcome the disaster, and the ending of the story. So let's start and understand the phases, phase by phase. So we will be doing phase 1 now, that is before the disaster. So we have already discussed that the narrator is going on a round the world voyage with his family, and they have been practicing their seafaring skills for about 16 years now, and the name of their boat is Wave Walker, which is a 23-meter, 30-ton wooden hulled boat. Initially I had mentioned 16 ton. Please remember that it is 30 ton. I'm sorry for my mistake. So their journey has a total distance of 1,05,000 kilometers, and they are going to cover it in a period of 3 years. So they start from Plymouth, England, and they are going over the west coast of Africa to Cape Town. So before they are heading for east, they decide that they will take with them 2 professionals, that is 2 crewmen, that is American Larry Vigil and Swiss Herb Segler. Now they are going to go for the Indian Ocean, and they are going to sail on it, and it is one of the roughest waters in the world, and for that they need professional help as well. So they take these 2 crewmen with them. Now, when they're in Cape Town, and it's the second day that they're in Cape Town, there are a lot of strong gales, and gales is basically another term for strong winds, and there are a lot of strong winds, and the weather is not very good, but still they continue to sail. Even the waves that come across are extremely huge. There are 15-meter high waves, and it is a bit scary, but there are holidays like Christmas and New Year that are also upcoming, and they decide to celebrate these 2 festivals with a lot of joy to keep the atmosphere a bit cheerful. The weather does not change for the better, but they still try and keep themselves happy as a family, and that's that. Now coming to January 2nd, after these holidays are done, January 2nd, enormous waves come their way. They're as high as the main mast, and it is extremely scary. So the narrator is traveling at a speed of 8 knots, and they decide that they should probably go a bit slower. So they dropped the small storm jib. They also lashed a heavy mooring rope in a loop across the stern. Mooring means fastening something, tying something using an anchor or with the help of an anchor. So that is the meaning of that sentence. And they decide that they should start preparing their drills for survival, that is their life raft drills, or they should start wearing their life jackets. They even don't oil skins. So they're taking all of these precautionary measures as well, because the weather does not look really suitable. So they are taking precautionary measures in advance, because they are seeing that the weather is not improving, and what if something happens, we should all be prepared. Okay, so now we will be discussing phase 2, that is the disaster and dealing with it. Now we have already discussed that on January 2nd, the weather was not really good, so they had already taken a few precautionary measures, and that included that they had donned oilskins, they had practiced their life raft drill, they had also worn their life jackets. Now we are talking about January 2nd, but we are talking about on January 2nd, 6 p.m., when there was ominous silence. Ominous is basically something that is evil, some kind of impending danger or a disaster. So there was ominous silence. Now, initially, the winds were creating a lot of noise, as I had told you. They were painful to the ears. But suddenly, right now, the winds had stopped. And it just grew darker and darker. The sky grew darker and darker. And they couldn't see anything. But suddenly, the narrator, who has been steering the wheel of the boat, he sees that something like a huge grey cloud is approaching the ship. But when that thing comes nearer, he says that it is not a grey cloud, but it is actually a huge wave that has come near them. And suddenly that huge wave of water just hits the boat, and it hits the crest of the boat. Crest is basically the front part of the boat, and the water has just smashed into the boat. It's hit the boat in all of these places, and the water has entered, and the narrator has drowned in this water. He's also hurt his head onto the wheel, and he's become unconscious, and he thinks that his death is near, and he's just drowned into this water. The ship, on the other hand, has almost become horizontal. The masts have almost become horizontal, but another wave hits the ship and then becomes vertical again. The narrator suddenly, his head pops out of the water and he gains back his consciousness. He's hurt his ribs as well, and his mouth is full of blood, but he decides that he can't leave the wheel of the boat alone and that he has to keep a check on it. So he gets up and he gets back to the wheel. He can't even go and look at how the ship is because the wheel is really important. He's steering the boat by the wheel. And then his wife Mary, she comes out of the deck. She's shouting that, all the deck is filled with water. The water has literally just entered the ship in all of these places. And he tells her, okay, you take care of the wheel. I'm going to go and check out the boat. I'm going to go look at our children as well. Larry and Herb Segler, who were the two crewmen that he'd got with himself, they were pumping water out of the boat like madmen, because obviously water had entered, and if water stays into the ship, they are going to sink and eventually die. So they were pumping out all of this water. So the narrator goes and he has a check on his children, and Suzanne, who is his 7-year-old daughter, she has this huge bump on her head, but really he doesn't have time to look at bumped heads right now. And what's important is to make sure that the water is off the ship so that they don't sink and die. So then he comes out and he sees that there are a lot of holes that have been created into this boat, and from where water is entering, and he has to cover these holes. So he gets himself a hammer, a few nails, some canvas sheets to try and to secure the boat and kind of waterproof all of these holes so that water does not enter through them. He tries and does that, but then another problem comes in, and that is the electric pump that they were using to push out the water of the ship has short-circuited. And why has it short-circuited? It is because there was a lot of debris that got stuck in the pump, and the debris is basically the garbage, the muck which was lying around in the cabin area, and it got stuck into this electric pump, and it short-circuited. And the two hand pumps that he had were not working, and suddenly he just realized that there is another electric pump, that extra electric pump. It has a connection with the out pipe as well. It has an out pipe as well, and that's the best option I have. He gets that, and that gets sorted. So they had also given mayday calls. Mayday calls are basically emergency signals for help, and they had given, but they were in the Indian Ocean, and that is one of the remotest areas of the world, one of the toughest oceans ever, and nobody was responding to their signals for help. So that is January 2nd. Now coming to January 3rd. So January 3rd, they have been pumping water really like mad people, and they've been taking turns and rotations for pumping out water off the boat, and the narrator, who decides that he should go and probably check the boat out because it's been hit so badly by a huge wave, and he goes and checks it out, and he realizes that the rib frames which were supporting the starboard of the boat had been broken. The water had smashed the boat so hard that these main rib frames had broken, and literally the starboard was now supported by a few cupboards and other things, and probably if another wave hit the boat, they wouldn't survive. So they had to, decide that they had to cut short this journey. They were actually heading towards Australia, from Cape Town to Australia, but now they realize that the journey is too long, and what if another wave hits us? We really won't be able to survive. Our entire ship is going to break. So we have to just cut short this journey. And how would that be? There were 2 islands in between Cape Town and Australia in this journey. There were 2 islands, and one of the islands was Isle Amsterdam, which was also a French scientific base, and they had to stop there because that was their only chance at survival. So that is January 3rd. Now coming to January 4th. Now January 4th, the family has been pumping for 36 hours continuously. They've been taking turns, and now literally just a few centimeters of water is left. Water is still coming into the ship, but it's really not that much, and they decide that they cannot set sail on the main mast, so they decide to hoist a storm jib. And that is when Mary also finds a little bit of food. She finds some corned beef and a few biscuit crackers, and they have their first meal in 2 days. They've been literally making so much effort and so much hard work, and they haven't eaten just a bit. So it's probably just very satisfactory eating something. But their happiness does not last a long time, because at 4 p.m. black clouds start to appear, and there are strong winds, and there are high waves, and it's getting scary again. What if waves hit the boat again, and what if everything's going to collapse, and literally they're on the edge of death, and what is going to happen? So it's really scary. And January 5th, in the morning of January 5th, the weather is still really bad. They're literally desperate for some good weathers, for some relief, but that isn't happening. So the narrator goes and visits his son Jonathan, and Jonathan asks him, "Daddy, are we going to die?" And he tries and assures him that, it's going to be fine. But Jonathan tells him that, Dad, what is the title of this chapter? We are not afraid to die if we are all together in this. You, me, Sue, and Mummy, if we are all together in this, I'm not even afraid of something as severe or as bad as death. And that really inspires the author, the narrator of this story, that, if my son finds his strength in unity, if he's so courageous all about it, then why am I not? So that we come back to the theme of the chapter, that is courage, valor, and composure in the time of adversity, and to find strength in unity. So he goes out, and he says that I have to figure a way out for our survival. And he goes out, and he sees that the starboard area is already really weak because the main rib frames had broken off. So if any other wave comes, we cannot have the starboard side of the boat face it. So he decides that the undamaged port hull of the boat is going to face the waves, and he makes a few efforts towards that end. Now coming to January 6th. So January 6th, the winds have become a bit easy. The weather has improved, but he is still working on it. He goes and rechecks the wind speeds, the course, the currents of the water. He tries to determine the position of the boat, and tries to determine the position of the islands. He's trying all of these things out. He's sitting with his wife Mary when his daughter Sue comes to him, and she gives them both a card, and Sue's really in a bad shape because she has this huge big swollen head, and she has huge blackened eyes, and literally she can't see. They're just slits instead of eyes, and she's given them both a card, and in the card there is a message that says thank you and we hope for the best. So that is also a source of inspiration for the narrator and his wife, that we have to get through this. Now let's move to phase 3. So we will now be discussing phase 3 of this chapter, that is aftermath and safe at last. So the narrator was sitting with his wife Mary when Sue had come to them and she'd given them a card, and after that the narrator was really inspired and really determined that he should fight for survival. So he goes and rechecks his calculations that, where is the island, where are we heading, if everything's right or not. He's using a spare compass which has not even been corrected because the actual good compass which they had gotten lost in all of this chaos. And he also tried to understand the influence of westerly currents which were on that particular part of the Indian Ocean. And he was trying his best, making all the efforts for survival. At 2 p.m. he went to Larry, who was steering the wheel of the boat, and he told them that he should steer the boat to like around 185 degrees, and if they were lucky, then by around 5 p.m. they should be seeing an island, that is Isle Amsterdam. And then he was really tired because he'd been working so hard, so he went and he dozed off on his bunk. And he woke up at 6 p.m. and he suddenly saw that, it's just dark outside, and what if we miss the island? I mean, we don't have any other chance at survival. What if the westerly currents or the waves, they hit us again and we won't be able to survive them? But suddenly his children, Sue and Jonathan, come to him. They hug him and say that, Daddy, you are our savior, you have saved us because we can finally see an island. And they went outside and saw the outline of the Isle Amsterdam island, and it appeared to be the most beautiful island in the world to them, even though it was just a bleak piece of volcanic rock with just a little bit of vegetation. It appeared to them to be the most beautiful island in the world because obviously it was their last chance of survival. So that is why it appeared to be the most beautiful to them. And they finally reached the island, and the next day only 28 inhabitants in that island, they came and they welcomed this family and all the 2 crewmen, and they had finally reached a place the narrator could finally feel ground under his feet, and they were safe at last. And after all of this had happened, Sue had braved 6 minor operations to remove a recurring blood clot, and she was so brave. I mean, she did not even care about her injury all through this journey, all through this time. And Jonathan was a boy who was not even afraid to die. So this is the story of courage, valor and composure in the times of adversity, strength and togetherness. And it's such an inspiring story. It tells us that these guys have been able to fight something as big as death. So probably if any obstacle comes in life, we have to have a brave face and face it head on. So that was the entire chapter explanation. If you like this video, then like, share and subscribe, and stay tuned to Scholarsharp for more such videos. Also, you can go to our Instagram page, that is by the name of Scholarsharp, to get all the updates of the upcoming videos. Thank you.